Year 11, welcome to your analysis of Hitcher by Simon Armitage in preparation for your English Literature Poetry exam. As always, I like to begin with structure. As we can see, the narrator of the poem presents a narrative of events in terms of what happens to him. So the poem comes across as a monologue where he delivers his thoughts. We can see straight away that the poet Simon Armitage uses regular stanzas. Now, obviously, I'm assuming you've read the poem before watching this analysis. The regular stanzas here represent the mundane, routine life that the narrator hates. We know that he hates this life in the very first stanza. He doesn't really want to go to work. So this routine and this idea that he has to do the same thing every day is what he hates. And the regular stanzas represent that. Remember, he wants to be free. Hence his jealousy of the hitchhiker that he picks up. After your regular stanzas, you've got the continued use of enjambment throughout. The enjambment allows the events to flow and it adds a pace, particularly in stanza 3 into 4 into 5, where we have the violent event. The enjambment allows this to happen quite quickly and almost places the reader in the perspective of the hitchhiker because it comes so fast and out of the blue that he's obviously not expecting it. Also, the enjambment, particularly on line 20 into 21, into 22, he said he'd like the breeze to run its fingers through his hair, represents the idea of freedom and the motion of the wind. And the wind here is personified, which we'll come to later, and symbolises the freedom that he so longs for. All right, so regular stanzas, enjambment, and the whole poem comes across as a monologue. If we begin our analysis of language with stanza 1 there, initially the reader feels sympathy for the narrator because we can see that he's tired, he doesn't feel very well, his boss is screaming at him. So in terms of language, you've got the first person pronoun I, which as always allows the reader to kind of relate to the narrator in terms of what they're saying, and as always it becomes more personal. The monologue of what's going on, or his thoughts here, becomes more personal because it's obviously straight from him to us. I'd been tired, under the weather obviously metaphorical of feeling ill. The answer phone kept screaming. You've got the phonetic spelling there of answer phone, so obviously how he pronounces it, and kept screaming. The answer phone kept screaming is personification, and this personification symbolises his anger and the anger he feels at the world as well as his boss and his job, I suppose. The spelling of answer phone phonetically, I suppose, is up to you how you interpret that. It could be a class thing. It could be the fact that we are shown by Simon Armitage the class of the narrator in terms of him possibly being a lesser class, and that, I suppose, is solidified by the idea that he really doesn't want to go to work and therefore hands in sick notes. As we carry on, we can see the use of italics. The use of italics here indicates the boss, and because you've got a different font for the narrator and a different font for the boss, you've got this clear difference between the two, and obviously a clear conflict. I thumbed a lift to where the car was parked. Clearly he hitches a ride for a specific reason, which is work. He's got a Vauxhall Astra, very ordinary car, and notice that it's hired. He doesn't even own it. In stanza 2, we hear about the hitchhiker. I picked him up in Leeds. He was following the sun to west from east with just a toothbrush and the good earth for a bed. The truth, he said, is you've got this very romanticised idea of his freedom and the fact that he doesn't have any responsibilities. And this is in stark contrast to the narrator in stanza 1, who has the responsibility of going to work and the boss shouting at him. The truth, he said, was blowing in the wind. Blowing in the wind is a reference to a Bob Dylan song, which has hippie, I suppose, and hippie ideals in terms of freedom and independence. The truth, he said, was blowing in the wind or round the next bend. You could argue that that's an instance of foreshadowing because as a reader, and when we've read the poem, we know that obviously round the next bend, unfortunately for the hitchhiker, is this beating he will receive. I let him have it. Straight away you've got this very sharp, quick sentence there to show you the violent reaction of the hitchhiker, of the narrator, towards the hitchhiker. He's taken out his frustration. This stanza is very matter of fact. It's very factual in the sense of he just tells you exactly what's happened. He hits him 6 times in the face and didn't even swerve. This very calm tone, I suppose, is threatening for the reader. The fact that his thoughts are relayed so calmly possibly suggests that the narrator is a psychopath, I suppose, to some degree. I already touched on enjambment, but the use of enjambment, particularly, as I said, in this stanza, it heightens the violence and it shows us that the narrator is disturbed. And as I said earlier, it creates that frantic sense of pace in terms of what's going on in the event. If we go on to the next stanza, I leant across to let him out and saw him in the mirror, bouncing off the curb, disappearing down the verge. We have the imagery of what's occurred, and it's very chilling and ominous, and has that threatening tone towards it because the reader can almost visualise what's going on. Interestingly, we are told that we were the same age, give or take a week. Is that what made him so frustrated and angry, that they were very similar, but the hitchhiker had the life that he wanted? Did it all stem from that, and therefore that's what caused him to be so violent and jealous, I suppose? Or is it the idea that actually they might be very similar people, just on different paths in their lives? And the last stanza, as I mentioned earlier, he said he'd like the breeze to run its fingers through his hair. Personification there of the freedom that he longs for, the freedom that he wants. Interestingly, after that we have once again factual information. It was 12 noon. The outlook for the day was moderate to fair. These statements show us that the event hasn't affected him at all. And once again we are presented with someone who's quite psychotic. We have a colloquial finish, which is stitch that I remember thinking you can walk from there. He's very self-centered. He's trying to make a joke here. And as I said, he's really not affected by the events that have occurred, which presents the reader with somebody somebody psychotic, a psychopath, not in touch with reality. If you got a question about how the narrator is presented, obviously you would say something along those lines.